in the Secondhand Lion playlist on my channel to keep reading. Either way, thank you so much for listening. Chapter 5. When it was so dark that Walter couldn't see his hand in front of his face, the two brothers stirred. He had thought they'd fallen asleep. He was terrified that they would stay there all night as the air cooled to an uncomfortable chill. He wasn't sure if he should try to wake them, or go inside himself, or just stay there and freeze to death. He had just decided that the last option might be the least painful way to go, when Garth suddenly sat up and moved crisply towards the door, as fresh and awake as the moment he'd sat down. Hub rose to his feet a moment later, a hulking shadow moving through the darkness on the porch. Garth opened the screen door and let Hub walk through, then hesitated for the slightest of moments, his eyes glancing toward Walter. Walter nearly cried out for joy and jumped up, scrambling into the house. The two brothers didn't even speak to each other. They seemed to have a routine. Garth gathered a couple of candles and lit them while Hub hung the shotguns on a wall in the hallway. Garth opened a drawer and took out a match, which he lit by snapping it along the back of his ear. He used that light to light the candles and gave one to Walter. Then he moved out of the kitchen and down the hall, toward the dark center of the house. A wide staircase rose there, and all three of them went upward. Each step creaked so badly that Walter was sure the stairs would collapse. But they made it to the next flight. Garth and Hub veered off to the right, where a hallway led to a number of bedrooms. Hub seemed to have already forgotten that Walter was even there, but Garth again paused just long enough to point to another set of stairs winding upward. This set was very steep and very narrow.
"You sleep up there, the tower."
Then he turned his back and walked down to his own room. Walter gulped. He looked at the stairs. These were so bad they made the first set look as solid as stone. Slowly testing each step, he carried his bag and his candle up the spiral steps.
"Hi,
It was Garth calling from somewhere below.
we don't know nothing about kids. If you need something, find it yourself.
Hub called.
Better yet, learn to do without. We're both getting pretty old, so...
Garth started.
And fixing to die any minute.
Hub interrupted.
If we kick off in the middle of the night, you're on your own."
Walter's imagination kicked in. He saw himself coming down for breakfast, yawning and sleepy-eyed. He took milk and Cheerios out and poured himself a bowl, sitting down at the table. In the chairs on each side sat two skeletons, Hub and Garth. Walter, on his own, continued to munch his cereal. Back in reality, Walter let out a yelp and hurried up the stairs. Below, Hub stopped at the door to his room and turned back to give his brother a steely glance.
"Jumpy little feller,"
he observed. "Mm-hmm," Garth said as he entered his own room.
"Quiet, though."
And that was the last they thought of Walter for the moment. Walter scrambled to the top of the stairs, kicking up dust and mold. He reached the tower room. Its floor sagged somewhat to the left. The room was piled with junk. Old chests, suitcases, pieces of furniture, magazines. In the corner was a bed. A big bed with a comforter that didn't look too musty. Quickly, Walter pulled some clothes out of his bag and changed into his pajamas. He picked up his toothbrush and looked around, hoping to find a bathroom. There was a small door just off the top of the stairs. He opened the door. Something big and red jumped out, smothering him. The big red figure had wrapped its arms around Walter, and something had covered his face. He struggled and felt himself tangled up. He staggered back, thrashing, and threw his attacker off with surprising ease. In the light of his candle, he saw a big red coat swirl away from him and land next to a pair of fur-lined boots and red pants. A big white beard lay nearby. It was a Santa Claus costume. A very old, very moth-eaten Santa costume. Walter picked up the fake beard and tried it on, looking into a musty, gold-framed mirror on the wall. "Ho, ho, ho," he said, with no cheer at all. Walter removed the beard and walked out of the tower room. He found another small door, and this time when he opened it, he found a tiny bathroom. The faucet spewed out brown water at first, but after a moment the pipes ran clean. Walter brushed his teeth quickly and turned back to his room just in time to hear the loudest snoring sound he had ever heard in his life. The sound reminded him of the noise his mother's Cadillac had made once before the engine exploded. That snore was answered by another snore, a higher pitch sound like gravel sliding across a metal sheet. If these old lunatics could just snore around sunset, they'd chase away all the salesmen before they even got to the door, he thought. Teeth brushed, pajamas on, Walter looked around the room one more time. It was tempting to explore. The little room was so full of valuable junk that was sure to prove interesting. A big steamer trunk caught his attention. The trunk was nearly covered in travel stickers from all over the world. In the candlelight, he saw stickers from countries like Morocco, France, Switzerland, and many others. Curious, Walter tried to open it, but it was locked. He tugged at the rusty lock, but it was as solid as the day it had been made. Giving up, Walter crawled into bed and pulled the covers over his body. The bed was actually very comfortable, and Walter felt sleep start to come over him after just a few moments. It had been a long car ride, and an even longer, strange evening. His mother's departure seemed like it had been days ago. Just as he dozed off, Walter remembered the candle. He sat up and leaned over to a dresser to blow it out for the night. He grabbed a big knob on the headboard to keep his balance. Suddenly, the knob snapped off in his hand and nearly made him fall on his face. For a moment, Walter could only imagine that it was termites, or wood rot, or any of a number of things that might be eating up this house. But when he looked at the knob, he saw that it hadn't broken off. The edges were smooth. It was designed to pop off. Walter saw a little cavity inside the bedpost. "It's fake," Walter whispered to himself. "A false bedpost." Something rattled inside the knob. Walter turned it over and shook it. A tiny key rattled out of the knob and fell. He caught it and held it up to look more closely. What in the world could this be for? But he knew the answer as sure as he knew his own name. A secret key and one enormous trunk locked with a padlock? Maybe he had just found the lost treasure. He jumped out of bed and went over to the enormous trunk. He put the key in the lock and watched it slide in easily. He grinned. He had found the treasure already. That meant his mother would have to come get him right away. With that in mind, Walter eagerly turned the key and heard a satisfying click. He threw back the lid, expecting to see a pile of gold with jewels and necklaces spilling out onto the floor. Instead, he saw only sand. Sand? He wondered aloud. There is a thin layer of it across the bottom of the trunk. Walter reached in and scooped up a handful. The sand was cool and fine. He let it pour between his fingers and scooped up another fistful. This time, his fingers touched something small and hard buried in the sand. It felt exactly like a large gold coin. When he had freed it from the sand and shaken it clean, he saw that it was indeed gold, but not a coin. It was a button, a gold button with strange foreign writing on it. Maybe it was just the trunk itself, but Walter imagined that the air had grown richer, spicier. He imagined a hint of music, a sense of something exotic and far away, across oceans and deserts. Putting the button aside, He dug in with both hands, searching for new discoveries. Almost immediately, he pulled up an old photograph buried in the sand. Gently, he blew sand off the surface to reveal a small, faded picture in black and white. It was a woman with black hair and warm black eyes. Even in that dim light, in that faded picture, the woman was beautiful. She was a princess right out of one of Walter's adventure books. She was smiling gently, but at the same time, there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. Walter didn't know why, but he blushed. A door slammed. Walter nearly jumped out of his skin before he realized that the door he had heard was downstairs. Someone had gone outside. He rushed over to his window and looked down. The moon was nearly full, and in its lights he could see a large figure, it had to be Hub, wearing a nightshirt and walking across the front yard. He was carrying a bathroom plunger and headed for the lake. Walter laid the picture down carefully and ran for the stairs. He slipped quietly out the door and hurried toward the lake. The dogs had been roused by the noise, but they did not bark. Instead, they gathered around Walter and trotted alongside him, completely silent on their padded paws, their heads low to the ground. They reached the lakeside and looked around. There was nothing to be seen except for the moon sparkling across the lake. Water lapped slowly at the shore. An owl hooted. The night was like the dogs, quiet but intense. Walter's heart was pounding against his ribs. He heard a noise behind and spun around. Hub loomed over him, the plunger raised high in the air like a sword. "Ah!" Walter cried, cowering down. But instead of striking, Hub staggered past him. The old man's eyes were open but unfocused, staring off at something Walter couldn't see. He stopped just at the water's edge, raising the plunger like a weapon in defiance against the night. One of the dogs padded forward and sat beside Walter, its body warm and solid against his leg. It was the big black mutt that had tried to break through the car window. "Sleepwalking," Walter whispered. "He's sleepwalking." The dog lay down and curled its tail around its feet. Walter took a few very cautious steps forward until he could see Hub's face. In the moonlight, Hub lost a little of his hardness and many of his years. A cold smile crossed his face. Then, with a cry, he swung the plunger like a sword and began to fight. He slashed at the air, parried an imaginary thrust, and replied with a savage overhead cut. It should have been ridiculous. A delirious old man swinging a plunger under the moonlight. But it wasn't ridiculous. Hub moved with so much grace and power that Walter forgot his uncle's age, the place, and the time. He swore he heard the echoes of swords clashing against one another, the thunder of hooves, and the cries of men in battle. Walter sat down beside the dog, curling himself up into a ball. Before him, the moonlight battle raged on. As Hub fought the armies of darkness and time, Walter felt his eyelids flutter. End of chapter 5. Thank you for reading with me today. If your teacher would like to listen to my connection questions for you to answer, continue listening. Otherwise, you can click on the next video on my Secondhand Lions playlist to continue reading on to the next chapter. Either way, thank you for listening to Secondhand Lions by John Whitman, narrated by me, Foster_reading. Chapter 5 questions. Number 1. When Walter imagines finding Hub and Garth as skeletons at the breakfast table, what does this reveal about him? A. He dislikes eating breakfast alone. B. He has an active imagination and is worried about being left on his own. C. He thinks Hub and Garth are secretly ghosts. Or D. He wants to leave the farm immediately. Question 2. Vocabulary in context. Read the sentence. Walter scrambled to the top of the stairs, kicking up dust and mold. What does the word scrambled most nearly mean in this sentence? A. Mixed together. B. Solved the problem. C. Moved quickly and awkwardly. D. Climbed carefully. Number 3. Literary analysis. Why do you think the author includes details about the travel stickers from places like Morocco, France, and Switzerland on the trunk? A. To show that Walter enjoys geography. B. To suggest the old men may have lived adventurous lives. C. To prove the trunk belongs to Walter's mother. Or D. To show that the trunk is very expensive. Number 4. Prediction. At the end of the chapter, Walter discovers Hub sleepwalking by the lake and acting out a battle. Based on this scene, what is the best prediction? A. Walter will become curious about Hub's past adventures. B. Walter will tell the police about Hub immediately. C. Hub will decide to move away from the farm. Or D. Walter will stop exploring the house. Number 5. Critical thinking. At first, Walter believes the trunk contains treasure that will make his mother come back for him. What does this reveal about Walter's motivation for opening the trunk? A. He only cares about becoming rich. B. He wants to prove he is smarter than Hub and Garth. C. He misses his mother and hopes to find a way to return home. Or D. He wants to sell the treasure for the money. End of questions. Thank you so much for reading with me today. I hope you continue to read Secondhand Lions by John Whitman, along with me, Foster Reading. I hope you have a wonderful day.